Well guys, I thought I was going to have the new and improved hopper car done by today, and here I am and have yet to even start working on it. A lot of people have asked to see the current version with its flaws and the new and improved version once it's done. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how this thing works and go over some of the tricks in making one. They really are much simpler than I think most people make them out to be. This is good because simplicity is needed given the fact that we have such a limited amount of space to work with. The first thing you're going to need to take into account is the model. You need a model that can fit the components inside. This Riviera is almost too small, but in the end I was able to get all the components in there. So let's take it apart and see how it works. So here's the body of the car. Gluing the windows in was the only thing different that I did to the body. They had to be glued because I removed all the tabs to make more room for the motors. So we can set this aside for now. Okay, so let's take a look at the front axle groove first. I just used a small file to enlarge the pre-existing groove put there by Mattel and drilled a hole in the middle. More on the hole later. I then used a small sheet of styrene cut and glued to act as one side of the wall for the groove. When that dried, I added a second piece to the other side. This large groove will allow our axle to go up and down without getting caught. As for the axle itself, it's a small paperclip bent into a U shape. The small paperclip is a tad bigger than the wire Mattel uses, so I can just pressure fit the wheels onto the wire. The car moves around enough when you're hopping it around. The fixed wheels help stabilize the car. Adding wheels with rubber tires to the axle is planned for the next version of this car, as this should help even more to keep the car from shifting around so much. So you'll notice that the axle has a small string glued to it. The string is then threaded through a hole and an eyelet. The eyelet protects the string and keeps it from getting bound up. You can find these eyelets at Hobby Lobby in the sewing section. They come in different sizes. Try to get the smallest one possible. Then use a drill just a little bit bigger than the eyelet to drill your hole in the middle of the axle groove, and then insert and glue the eyelet. Be sure to do this before you put in the groove walls, otherwise the drill bit may damage them. You can see that the string comes out the axle hole, across the base, and then up into another eyelet, and then is glued to a tube of styrene that itself is glued to a shaft of a motor. I'll put a link below for the eBay auction for these motors. Be sure to leave enough slack in the string so that the axle can move all the way to the top of the grooves you made. The motors are glued into place so that the styrene shaft is positioned over the hole and eyelet. Okay, so here's what's going on. When you apply power to the motor, the shaft spins and starts reeling in the string, which causes the axle to move to the bottom of the base, lifting the front or back of the car depending on what motor you gave power to. When you release the button, the tension is lost, and the weight of the car causes the string to unwind from the motor and let the car back down. Getting motors strong enough to lift the car plus the motors was the real challenge in this whole endeavor. Alright, that's the mechanism of the device. Let's now take a look at wiring the motors. Each motor has two terminals on it. You will need to solder wires to all these terminals. Let's say for the sake of making things easy, you solder one red and one black to each motor. You'll find it easier to solder the wires to the motors and then glue the motors to the base, just FYI. Now you will need two momentary switches, one for each motor. These switches can be mounted in a project box that will later also hold the batteries if you like. Each momentary switch also has two terminals. To one of the terminals of each of the switch, solder a white wire. It can be any color, but for the sake of explaining, I'll use white. To the other terminal of the switch, solder the black wire from the motor. So now you should have a motor with a black and red wire. The black wire is soldered to the switch, and the switch also has a loose white wire. Now do the same for the second motor. You should now have two loose red wires connected to the motors and two loose white wires connected to the switches. Connect or twist together the copper of the two red wires and then connect the two white wires in the same manner. The red wires should connect to the positive side of your battery pack and the white wires to the negative. Once this is all hooked up, you can put the car back together and start using your new toy. Now I'm not using a battery pack at the moment, as I have mine hooked up to a variable power supply that I can just dial in the 6 volts the motors need. To To get 6-volt with AA or AAA batteries, you'll need 4 batteries. You can buy battery holders or packs that can hold these 4 batteries. I'll put links to all these parts below. At this point, you should have a working hopper car. All that may be left is to tidy up the aesthetics. For example, cutting a hole in the back of the car to have the wires come out, and doing the same to your project box, aka remote control box. It's very likely you'll also have to do some tweaking here and there to get everything to work smoothly. That's okay, that's pretty normal. So in my next video on this particular subject, I'll show some areas that I think I can improve on. For example, the U wire might work better if it was more of a W shape instead. I'll also get into more detail on the battery holder and how all that's wired up, along with incorporating some ideas that you guys had, like using motor winding wire instead of the thicker wire I'm using now. You should have a good idea how these cars are made now and should be able to create your own with your own modifications. I want to be sure to thank another YouTuber, and I know I'll mispronounce his name, but I think it's Heves or maybe Jevis. I can never find a video where he spoke to get the correct pronunciation. Anyway, I'll leave a link to his pioneering video on how to make these cars below. Pretty much all of this comes from that one video. I'll also be working on the update video to this particular video as soon as I can get to it. I have a few other items I will be posting first, so keep a lookout for them. Hope this one was at least interesting to you. Please like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.